The shroud, it's like the cloth that Jesus was buried in and left an image of him. And in the 80s, like 1988, they did carbon dating on it. And they go, oh, it's fake. See that?
When scientists extracted DNA from the Turin Shroud, they expected simple answers. Maybe traces of a single medieval craftsman, perhaps remnants of European contamination from centuries of handling. What they found instead left the research team completely speechless.
And we see that pulmonary edema reflected both on the shroud cloth and on the Sudarian of Oviedo, the face cloth.
The genetic data didn't just challenge existing theories, it shattered them entirely. For over 600 years, this ancient burial cloth has divided the world. Believers call it the authentic burial shroud of Jesus Christ, a silent witness to the resurrection, a fifth gospel written not in ink but in blood and linen. Skeptics dismiss it as history's most elaborate hoax, a medieval forgery so sophisticated it fooled millions. But when geneticists finally cracked the biological code hidden within its fibers, neither side was prepared for what the DNA revealed. The shroud had been carrying a secret, a genetic map spanning 3 continents, a molecular trail leading back through 2,000 years of human history, and evidence so compelling that even the most determined debunkers couldn't explain it away. This is the story of how modern science unlocked the shroud's deepest mystery: the impossible genetic map. The geneticist stares at the screen. The DNA results make no sense. This cloth is supposed to be a medieval French forgery. So, why is there genetic material from China? From India? From a remote Ethiopian Christian community that barely made contact with Europe in the 14th century? The data is impossible, unless the shroud isn't a forgery at all. Professor Gianni Barcaccia and his team at the University of Padua spent weeks running samples through next-generation sequencing machines. They used micro-vacuums to pull particles from between the threads. No contamination allowed. One stray skin cell from a modern priest could destroy the entire data set. The samples went into ultra-clean laboratories. The computers ran non-stop, decoding millions of nucleotide sequences. They focused on mitochondrial DNA. Unlike nuclear DNA, mitochondrial DNA exists in hundreds of copies per cell. It passes down exclusively through the maternal line. It survives far longer in degraded ancient material. It serves as a powerful marker of geographic origin. They expected one dominant genetic signature. If French monks created this cloth around 1350, European DNA should overwhelm everything else. If the shroud never left Jerusalem, Middle Eastern markers should dominate. Neither scenario matches the data. The genetic map spans 3 continents: Europe, the Middle East, East Asia, Africa, South Asia, all of it encoded into one ancient cloth. Nature publishes the results in scientific reports. The scientific world takes notice. Here's what the DNA reveals. From the Middle East, haplogroups linked to the Druze, a tightly knit ethno-religious community in the mountains of Israel, Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria. Druze DNA is ancient and remarkably stable. It barely changed over thousands of years, due to centuries of isolation. This marker points directly to the Levant. From Western Europe, haplogroups U5b and H1 through H3. Expected. The shroud sat in European hands since the 15th century. Nuns repaired it. The House of Savoy owned it. Pilgrims touched it for 600 years, from North and East Africa. Haplogroup L3C M1A1. This points to Egypt and Ethiopia, the earliest Christian communities outside Palestine, communities that existed before Christianity spread to Europe. From South Asia, haplogroups M39, M56, and R8. Genetic markers from the Indian subcontinent, from people who lived thousands of miles from any medieval European workshop. From East Asia, haplogroups D4 and G2A. Markers associated with China, the other side of the known world. China, India, Africa, Europe, the Middle East. One piece of cloth. The genetic fingerprints of half the ancient world. The forgery. Theory collapses. A medieval forger working in a French abbey around 1350 faces an impossible task. He must somehow gather dust and DNA from people in China, from India, from Ethiopian highlands, from the deserts of the Middle East. regions he knows only through Marco Polo's distant tales, regions most Europeans believed were populated by monsters and mythical creatures. Then he must plant those traces onto a cloth in a way that will deceive genetic scientists 600 years later. Scientists using technology he cannot imagine, searching for evidence he does not know exists. This is not random contamination. The genetic distribution is too specific, too precisely tied to ancient migrations patterns and trade routes, too consistent with a documented historical journey that spans 2,000 years. The DNA on the shroud is the collective biological memory of humanity. Dust from the sandals, robes, and hands of countless people who gazed upon this face across centuries and civilizations. A forger cannot fake this. A forger cannot even imagine this. The concept of DNA did not exist until 1869. Genetic sequencing did not exist until the 1970s. No medieval craftsman could anticipate that invisible biological traces would one day testify against him. The genetic evidence aligns with almost perfect geographic accuracy to an ancient route that scholars long dismissed as legend. The journey of the Mandylion, the image made without hands, a relic that Byzantine sources describe in vivid detail. The forgery theory does not just weaken, it collapses entirely. If you want to see how deep this mystery goes, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. The next piece of evidence is even harder to explain. The journey. According to Byzantine, Syrian, and Arabic sources, the shroud traveled across the ancient world. Someone folded it in four so only the face showed. They displayed it in a special frame. They called it the tetradiplon, the folded in four. The journey began in Jerusalem, the place of death and burial, the city where everything started. From there, it moved to Edessa in modern-day Turkey around the 2nd century. Ancient sources say the cloth was hidden within the city walls during times of persecution, then rediscovered, then venerated as the city's most sacred protector. Edessa stood at a vital crossroads. The Great Silk Road ran directly through the city. Caravans from China carried silk, porcelain, and spices. Merchants from India brought textiles, gems, and exotic goods. Traders from Persia and Arabia passed through constantly. Diplomats traveled between empires. Pilgrims sought holy sites. Everyone came to venerate the relic. They believed it protected their city from invasion. They believed it held miraculous power. They breathed near it. They kissed its casing. They touched it with trembling hands. With each encounter, microscopic traces settled onto the cloth. Skin cells, hair fragments, sweat, tears, layer upon layer, century after century. The DNA of the Silk Road accumulated on its surface like invisible dust. A biological record that no one knew was being written. In 944, the Byzantine emperors acquired the relic. Some sources say they purchased it. Others say they took it by force. Either way, they brought it to Constantinople, the capital of the medieval world, the greatest city on earth at that time. Constantinople was a mega-city, a place where peoples of every race, culture, and region converged. Greeks, Armenians, Syrians, Egyptians, Persians, Slavs, Vikings who served as imperial guards, merchants from every corner of the known world. For over 250 years, the cloth remained in the heart of this human crossroads. Then, in 1204, Crusaders from Western Europe sacked Constantinople. They looted churches. They melted down sacred objects. They stole relics. In the chaos, the shroud vanished from the historical record. It surfaced briefly in Athens around 1205. French knights held it. Then, in 1353, it appeared in Lire, France. A knight named Geoffroy de Charny possessed it. No record explains how he acquired it. The shroud simply reappears, as if emerging from shadow. Each stop on this journey left biological traces. The Silk Road deposited Chinese and Indian markers. Constantinople added genetic signatures from across the Byzantine world. Athens contributed Greek DNA. Europe layered its own markers during the past 6 centuries. The DNA tells the story of this journey, a trail invisible to the eye. A molecular map of human contact spanning 2 millennia. A record no forger could fabricate because no forger could know it would ever be read. The crown of thorns. Human DNA is only half the evidence. Plants tell the other half. Professor Avinoam Dainin from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem examined pollen grains trapped in the linen's fibers. He used adhesive tapes to lift microscopic samples. Swiss forensic scientist Max Frey, a pioneer of forensic pollen analysis, conducted independent research. They worked separately. They did not coordinate. Their findings converged. 58 different plant species left pollen on the shroud. 17 species grow in Europe, expected. The shroud spent 6 centuries there. European pollen should be present. The majority grow elsewhere. The Middle East, Turkey, the Anatolian steppe. These match the ancient route through Edessa and Constantinople perfectly. The pollen confirms what the DNA suggests. This cloth traveled the ancient world. Then came the discovery that silenced the room. A group of plants that grow nowhere else on Earth, species found only in a narrow corridor between Jerusalem and Jericho. Plants that do not exist in France, plants that do not exist anywhere in Europe, plants that grow only in the Judean wilderness. One plant dominated everything. Gundelia tournifortii, a thorny desert thistle. Its pollen accounted for nearly half of all samples on the cloth, an enormous concentration. An impossible concentration for a European forgery. Why would pollen from a thorny plant saturate a burial cloth? The crown of thorns. Gundelia tournifortii has long, rigid, needle-like thorns, exactly the kind of plant Roman soldiers would grab to twist together a mocking crown for the King of the Jews. The Gospels describe this moment. Soldiers pressed a crown of thorns onto Christ's head. They beat him. They mocked him. This thistle blooms around Jerusalem at a very specific time. Early spring, during Passover, the exact time the Gospels place the crucifixion. The pollen concentration is heaviest around the head and shoulder areas of the cloth, exactly where a crown would rest, exactly where it would shed pollen as thorns pressed into flesh. A second plant confirmed the location. Zygophyllum dumosum. This species grows only in the Judean desert and parts of the Sinai Peninsula, nowhere else on Earth. Its pollen appeared on the shroud in significant quantities. A medieval French forger cannot obtain pollen from plants that grow only in Israel. He cannot travel to Jerusalem, collect invisible pollen grains, and apply them at microscopic levels onto a cloth. Pollen cannot be painted. It cannot be seen with the naked eye. It cannot be deliberately placed. It acts like an invisible seal from a crime scene, a geographic fingerprint that cannot be forged, a botanical witness that testifies across centuries. Blood that screams. For decades, skeptics claimed the reddish marks on the shroud were pigments: ochre, cinnabar, tempera mixed with gelatin, medieval paint applied by a skilled artist. In 2017, Professor Giulio Fanti of the University of Padua examined the stains using transmission electron, microscopy, and Raman spectroscopy. His team worked alongside physicians from a hospital in Trieste. They analyzed the material at the nanoscale. They looked at individual molecules. They found blood, not pigment, human blood, type AB, one of the rarest blood types in the world. Only about 3% of the global population carries it. Yet, this same blood type appears on the Sudarium of Oviedo. Another cloth tradition links to Christ. A cloth kept in Spain since the 7th century. 2 cloths, same rare blood type, separated by centuries and thousands of miles. This blood did not come from a healthy person. The analysis revealed nanoparticles of creatinine and ferritin bound to hemoglobin. Such extreme concentrations appear under one condition only: severe, fatal trauma, prolonged torture, dehydration, massive muscle damage. When repeated blows destroy muscle tissue, a process called rhabdomyolysis floods the bloodstream with creatinine. The kidneys cannot filter it fast enough. The blood becomes saturated with markers of cellular destruction. The blood on this cloth recorded exactly that. This is biochemistry screaming of pain. The man wrapped in this cloth did not simply die. Someone beat him to a condition incompatible with life before the crucifixion began. The body shows evidence of more than 100 separate wounds. Wounds consistent with the Roman flagrum, a whip with multiple leather strands, lead weights or bone fragments embedded in the tips, designed to shred flesh. This matches the gospel accounts of Roman scourging. Soldiers whipped Christ before the crucifixion. They did not hold back. The shroud records the result. An artist can paint the appearance of a wound. No artist can imitate the biochemical signature of a body in extreme trauma. Polytrauma, kidney failure, hypovolemic shock. These conditions leave chemical markers that only modern science can detect. A medieval painter cannot fake what he does not know exists. One more mystery. Ancient blood turns dark brown or black over time. Hemoglobin oxidizes. The color changes. Every forensic scientist knows this. The stains on the shroud remain red. The analysis revealed unusually high levels of bilirubin. The liver releases this substance during extreme stress and severe trauma. When the body experiences catastrophic damage, bilirubin floods the bloodstream, and bilirubin preserves the red coloration of blood for centuries. The blood of a tortured man stays red. This is not mysticism. This is not miracle. This is biochemistry under extreme stress. The body itself recorded its final agony in chemical signatures that endure across 2,000 years. The dating scandal. In 1988, radiocarbon testing appeared to end the debate. 3 laboratories announced their verdict with 95% confidence. Oxford, Zurich, Arizona, the best in the world. The fabric dated to between 1260 and 1390, the Middle Ages. A forgery, case closed. The world accepted this. Headlines declared the mystery solved. The Catholic Church stepped back. They called the shroud an icon rather than a relic. Skeptics celebrated. Believers fell silent. 30 years later, researchers identified the fatal mistake. The error was not in the technology. Radiocarbon dating works. The error was in the sample. Human error. Sampling error. The most basic mistake. In archaeological science, in 1988, technicians cut a tiny piece of cloth from the very edge of the shroud, no larger than a postage stamp. That corner had been handled countless times over centuries. Bishops grasped it during public displays, cardinals touched it, pilgrims reached for it. Sweat, skin oils, candle wax, and bacteria accumulated there. That edge suffered more contamination than any other part of the cloth. Chemist Ray Rogers of Los Alamos National Laboratory discovered something worse. Medieval nuns had repaired that corner. The shroud was damaged in a fire in 1532. The Poor Clare's nuns patched the burned areas. They used a technique called invisible mending. They wove in new cotton threads dyed to match the aged linen. They used alizarin dye and gum arabic to disguise the repair. They did their work so skillfully that no one noticed for 500 years. Chemical analysis of the 1988 sample revealed cotton fibers. The main body of the shroud contains no cotton. It is pure linen. The sample tested in 1988 came from a medieval repair patch, not from the original cloth. The laboratories dated the patch, not the shroud. They measured the age of medieval cotton and centuries of accumulated grime, not the first century linen underneath. This was not a minor oversight. Dating the most contaminated section of an artifact is like determining the age of an ancient statue by analyzing chewing gum stuck to its base. The result tells you nothing about the statue, only about the gum. The 1988 results are scientifically worthless. The sample was compromised. The conclusions were wrong. X-ray redemption. In 2022, Italian physicist Liberato De Caro applied a new technique, wide-angle X-ray scattering, WAXS, a method that bypasses contamination entirely. This approach does not measure organic material that can be contaminated. It measures the aging of cellulose within linen fibers at the atomic level, the structure of the linen itself. Linen degrades naturally over time. The long polymer chains of cellulose break apart. The crystalline structure deteriorates under exposure to background radiation, humidity, and temperature fluctuations. This process is slow, steady, predictable. It acts as the material's internal clock, a clock that contamination cannot reset. De Caro compared shroud samples against fabrics with firmly established ages, Egyptian mummy wrappings from 3000 BC, Roman-era textiles, medieval fabrics from the 10th through 14th centuries. Each sample showed a different degree of cellulose degradation. Each told its age through molecular structure. The shroud's cellulose did not match medieval fabrics. Not even close. The degradation was far more advanced. The molecular structure was far older. The aging curve matched almost perfectly with linen fragments from the fortress of Masada in Israel. Masada fell in 74 AD. Roman legions besieged the fortress. Jewish defenders held out for months. When defeat became inevitable, they chose death over slavery. The textiles recovered from Masada date to between 50 and 74 AD, the 1st century, the time of Christ. The shroud's linen shows the same degree of aging, the same molecular degradation, the same internal clock reading. In 1988, science dismissed the shroud. In 2022, advanced X-ray analysis placed it in the heart of biblical history. The age of the cloth shifted by over 1,000 years. The debate changed forever. The image that defies physics. One mystery remains. The deepest mystery of all, how did the image form? There are no brushstrokes, no pigments, no ink, no dye. The image exists only on the outermost surface of the fibers, 200 nanometers deep, hundreds of times thinner than a human hair. Scrape it and it vanishes. It does not penetrate the cloth. It sits on top like a shadow burned into the surface. This is not paint. This is a chemical transformation. Oxidation and dehydration of the cellulose fibers, a burn left by an unknown energy source. Something changed the molecular structure of the linen itself. Scientists tried everything to replicate it: acid, heat, gamma rays, ultraviolet light, laser pulses. Nothing worked. Nothing produced the same effect. Only a short, intense pulse of vacuum ultraviolet radiation came close. VUV light. A specific wavelength that causes surface oxidation without penetrating deeper. Such lasers did not exist in antiquity. They barely exist now. To form the image across 4 square meters of cloth, the body would have emitted an unimaginable burst of energy. Duration. Less than 1/1000th of a second. Intensity. Enough to imprint the cloth. Precision. Enough not to destroy it. In 1976, NASA scientists analyzed the shroud using VP8 image analyzer technology, equipment designed to create 3-dimensional terrain maps from flat images. They made a discovery that stunned them. The shroud contains a perfect 3-dimensional image. The intensity of the imprint corresponds exactly to the distance. Between the body and the cloth, areas closer to the body appear darker. Areas farther away appear lighter. The gradient is mathematically precise. No painting works this way. No photograph works this way. The shroud encodes 3-dimensional spatial information in a 2-dimensional image, something only possible if the image formed through radiation emanating from the body itself. No artist, ancient or modern, can reproduce this. Digital analysis revealed more. Coins on the eyes. They match rare lepta minted by Pontius Pilate in 29 AD. Tiny coins, nearly invisible to the naked eye. The probability that a medieval forger knew about these coins is 0. They were not cataloged until the 20th century. The nails pierce the wrists, not the palms. Medieval artists always depicted nails through the palms. Every crucifixion painting shows this. Every sculpture, every illustration. Artists did not know that palms cannot support body weight. The flesh tears. The body falls. Roman. Executioners knew this. They drove nails through the wrists, through the carpal bones. The shroud shows exactly this placement. The thumbs bend inward, a reflex caused when the median nerve is damaged. A detail no medieval artist knew. A detail only modern forensic science understands. The shroud records anatomical accuracy that did not exist in medieval knowledge. The evidence speaks DNA from 3 continents. Pollen from plants that grow only near Jerusalem. Blood chemistry proving extreme torture. X-ray dating placing the linen in the 1st century. An image that defies every known method of creation. Layer by layer, the evidence converges. Biology, chemistry, physics, geology, botany, genetics, forensic medicine, numismatics, history. This cloth traveled the ancient world. It absorbed the biological traces of everyone who encountered it across 2,000 years. It recorded the botanical fingerprint of its origin. It preserved the blood of a man who suffered beyond imagination. It captured an image through a process modern physics cannot fully explain. The shroud sits in its vault in Turin, silent, locked away, brought out only for rare exhibitions, studied only by authorized researchers, but the data speaks for it. What was once dismissed as medieval fraud now carries the weight of measurable scientific evidence. The 1988 dating is discredited. The forgery theory has collapsed. The question is no longer whether this cloth is old. The question is what happened to create that image. What burst of energy imprinted a human form onto linen with such precision? What event left behind a three-dimensional record encoded in oxidized fibers? Science has revealed the evidence. Science has not explained the mechanism. The shroud remains an open case, a mystery that deepens with every new discovery. Science has spoken. The question now is whether anyone is listening. Drop your verdict in the comments. And if this changed how you see the shroud, hit that subscribe button. More mysteries are coming.